Good morning and welcome to Wake Up Well on this Good Friday morning. And so we focus on the death of Jesus. In John's Gospel, John 15, verse 12 and verse 13, we read this. We are to love one another as Christ loved us. And there is no greater love than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends. The death of Jesus is closely linked to the call to become a follower of Jesus. The two, in fact, are inseparable: death and discipleship. In Mark's Gospel, Mark chapter 8, Jesus predicts his death. He predicts the events of this Good Friday day. He foretells what is to come. Then Jesus began to tell them, "The Son of Man must suffer many terrible things and be rejected by the elders, the leading priests and the teachers of the religious law. He would be killed, but 3 days later he would rise from the dead." And he talked about this openly with his disciples, and Peter took him aside and began to reprimand him for saying such things. And Jesus turned and looked at Peter and his disciples and said, "Get away from me, Satan. You are seeing things merely from a human point of view, not from God's." Then, calling the crowd to join his disciples, he said, "If anyone of you wants to follow me, you must turn from your selfish ways, take up your cross and follow me. If you are trying to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake and for the sake of the good news, you will save it. And what do you benefit if you gain the whole world yet forfeit your soul? Is anything worth more than your soul?" The call to follow Jesus, to come die, is a powerful call, a costly call. And sometimes it's a daily call to take up our cross and to go to the cross. And on this Good Friday morning, we consider carefully the events of this day and our daily walk of discipleship. In Matthew chapter 26 of this Gospel, Jesus finds himself in the Garden of Gethsemane, and his outpouring of his heart is to avoid the suffering, to choose a different path. We often get halfway to the cross and begin to back away and head in different directions. Surrender is always costly. And while pouring out his heart to his Father, he cries, "Let this cup of suffering, pass from me." But the answer was not to avoid the cup. The answer was to sip of the cup, to pass through the suffering. And so on this day we remember his path to the cross, his death, his suffering, the pain, the hardship, the horror for each one of us. But we also remember that the greatest agony, that cry in Gethsemane, was one of embracing true suffering, the greatest suffering he could know, the suffering of separation from his Heavenly Father. And so we remember as we hear and consider the narrative of the cross today, probably read to us in different contexts, and I would encourage you to really engage with Good Friday wherever you are and whatever this day entails with you, and to give it the space to remember that call to the cross. His death makes a way for not only the forgiveness of sin, the salvation of many, but for that separation that he agonized over, to be put to death, finally, once and for all, for you and for me and for for mankind. That separation from God would be no more. And so we read in Revelation 1 verse 17, "Behold, I hold the keys to death and to Hades."